The White House insists President Biden isn't paying much attention to the Senate impeachment trial. Instead, he says his focus is on the pandemic. Mr. Biden is pushing forward a $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief proposal. This week, he tried to rally support for the American Rescue Plan among industry leaders. On Thursday, the president toured a laboratory at the National Institutes of Health. He touted efforts to boost the nation's supply of vaccines.
We signed the final contracts for 100 million more Moderna and 100 million more Pfizer vaccines. We're also able to move up the delivery dates with an additional 200 million vaccines to the end of July. Both companies agreed, and we're now contractually obligated to expedite delivery of 100 million doses that were promised by the end of June to deliver them by the end of May. That means we're now on track to have enough supply for 300 million Americans by the end of July.
For more, let's bring in CBSN political contributor Zeke Miller. He's a White House reporter for the Associated Press. Hi there, Zeke. So the White House is trying to build a coalition of support for its COVID relief plan. Is the rising price tag, though, scaring off Republicans?
Yes, certainly Republicans have sort of all of a sudden caught religion again when it comes to deficit spending after years of deficit spending under President Trump. Certainly, the Trump tax cuts contribute to the deficit about as much as this recovery package will be for that the Biden administration is pushing forward for. But Republicans are also raising concern that this may not be necessary, that the economy is on its way back steadily, that with the rollout of the vaccines and the like, a package of this magnitude may not be necessary, and that the Biden plan may be too aggressive, too ambitious for what the times call for. That is an argument the White House rejects out of hand, saying that this is precisely the sort of emergency situation where you throw everything at it, and it needs to be as large as that is. And they also want to use this state of emergency not just to get back to where things were before the pandemic. Biden's campaign promise was to build back better, and they are looking to use this legislation to accomplish a whole host of other Democratic priorities, including the $15 minimum wage, though that may not make it through the Senate. But things along those lines, they want to sort of put together into this package to do something not just to help the economy, but also to not just to stimulate growth, but also sort of to recover into a different sort of environment than where things were before the pandemic.
And Zeke, you've reported that the Trump administration used terms typically associated with natural disasters in talking about the pandemic. How has that changed under the Biden administration?
In 3 weeks, the White House is adopting the terminology of the Pentagon, overwhelming force, overwhelming the problem, things like that, deploying the military. Where the Trump administration, the phrase that we heard a lot was federally supported, state managed, and locally executed. At the Biden White House is adopting a very different approach, which is this is a war. We're going to run it like a war. Nobody goes to their mayor asking how you're going to defeat al-Qaeda. You look to the federal government, you look to the president, you look to the White House and the military. The president is already planning to deploy roughly 10,000 active duty troops to stand up mass vaccination sites across the country. More may follow. That is a sort of, this is not a national emergency in their view. This is a war, and they were trying to deploy those sorts of resources and use that sort of terminology to describe the magnitude of the challenge ahead.
And Zeke, the White House is facing pressure for details on how to reopen schools during the first 100 days of President Biden's term. Have they laid out any such plans yet?
We're expecting to see guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on how to safely reopen schools Friday afternoon. We've seen bits and pieces. We sort of know part of what's in there from the way the officials have described it. It will include bits on how schools should take to screen students every day, distance them, improve ventilation. It will talk about whether or not teachers need to be vaccinated in order to safely reopen some of those schools, which has been something of debate of late between teachers unions and school districts across the country. This has been one of those areas, one of the notable areas where the Biden administration is sort of squeezed on all sides, whether they be from parents who want their kids back in schools, by teachers unions who want their members protected, by school districts that are saying we need more funding, we need more resources, we need more guidance from the federal government to do all of those things. So there's a lot of anticipation for this guidance to come tomorrow.
Yeah. Thursday morning, President Biden and Vice President Harris met with a bipartisan group of senators to discuss America's aging infrastructure. Now, the Trump White House failed to pass any such bill, despite saying it was a priority. But does President Biden have a better shot at actually getting it done?
Now, there certainly is a lot of appetite on both sides of the aisle here in Washington to do something on infrastructure. And the Biden administration is unlikely to repeat the same mistakes of the Trump administration, where infrastructure became sort of a punchline around town. They actually want to get it done. They want to put resources behind it. The challenge for them is that, particularly when it comes to this $1.9 trillion recovery bill that they're looking for right now, is that's going to take up a lot of the resources that the Biden administration is going to, that the Republicans are going to want to use for infrastructure spending. So particularly with concerns right now about the deficit rising anew in the Republican Party, and there's certainly going to be a lot of debate about how real some of that those Republican concerns are. Is it politically charged, or is it deeply rooted core beliefs? That is going to reduce some of the appetite. That said, also infrastructure, talking about it gives the Biden administration the opportunity to signal their desire to work in that bipartisan fashion, when right now it's looking increasingly like on their stimulus and recovery package that is going to pass by reconciliation without Republican votes.
You know, the framing of this is interesting because President Biden says that China is vastly outpacing the U.S. when it comes to this question of infrastructure. Are we getting a sense, Zeke, of the approach the administration is taking when it comes to handling relations with China?
And we know that that President Biden had that 2-hour conversation with President Xi last night, and that they talked about a range of issues. The White House today saying that that the president views China as a competitor, which is the language that President Biden has used before, and that the president echoed in that conversation regarding infrastructure as well. That the U.S. needs to step up its game, or else it risks being eclipsed, not just on infrastructure, but in the geopolitical sphere as well, by China. So I think we should expect to see some more of that rhetoric. It's notable that of all the things that President Trump did, that President Biden has tried to roll back in his first 3 weeks in office, they have not been any of the measures targeting China. China is still on. It's been a remarkable continuity so far in terms of the posture towards China between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. And that should signal really just how dramatically the politics on that issue have shifted over the years, and really how in both sides in Washington and Democrats and Republicans both have a similar view of China. They might disagree on some of the tactics, but there's not a whole lot of desire to go easy on China right now.
Yeah, remarkable really is the word when you look at the similarities in the approaches so far anyway. And finally, Zeke, the New York Times has some new reporting about the severity of coronavirus symptoms that President Trump was dealing with after becoming infected back in October. What can you tell us?
Well, the New York Times is reporting that that X-rays showed that the president's condition at that time, President Trump's condition, on that Friday in October when he was diagnosed with coronavirus, were far worse than is previously known, which is what necessitated his transfer to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. That there were concerns that he potentially would need to be put on a ventilator. We had previously known, both from the president's doctor and then from the former president's chief of staff, that the president experienced drops in oxygen saturation. That his condition was far worse than had been known at the time contemporaneously, and that it improved in part because of the experimental treatments that he was given. This is just sort of yet another data point that just reveals just how close things were to getting very bad on that October day when the president came down with the coronavirus, and really make more notable, make more astonishing sort of the president's later comments, sort of trying to minimize the entire episode entirely. It was very serious. Clearly at the time, it's why he had to go to the hospital. And it was not treated that way by him or by his administration thereafter.
Yeah, I'm looking at the piece now, and it says the people familiar with Mr. Trump's health said he was found to have lung infiltrates, which occur when the lungs are inflamed and contain substances such as fluid or bacteria. So a lot of previously unreported details in that. All right, Zeke Miller for us. Zeke, always great to have you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.